So much to cover, from a lot of the legislation that's winding its way through Congress to what seems like a softening stance from the SEC. And I do want to start there with the commission. A lot of moves in your case recently. I think the most recent filing was to, again, try to dismiss the case altogether ahead of your hearing on June 12th. How are you feeling about the status of all that?
Look, this is a case that never should have been brought. It was about 1 year ago I testified on behalf of my client, Kraken, that the SEC would have to share the jurisdiction it was claiming over crypto with other federal agencies, like the CFTC. We don't think they like that because exactly 1 day later, almost down to the hour, we got the call saying they were going to sue us. We don't think this is a case that ever should have been brought, and as a result, we're moving to dismiss it. We put in our moving papers a little while back. The SEC responded. We had one last chance to reply. Now the case is fully briefed. So in a few weeks, we'll go in front of the judge of the Northern District of California, and we'll make our oral arguments. We'll actually argue before the court the same things we argued in our moving papers. The SEC will have a chance to rebut, and there will be a live argument, just like there was in Coinbase, just like there was in Binance. They're similar cases.
How confident are you that the judge will dismiss the case?
Look, judges are reluctant to dismiss cases at the early stages, particularly when they're brought by the government. We have a lot of faith in our government usually. We don't think this is a case that ever should have been brought. This is a case that is more politics than it is policy. We like to think the court's going to see that as well.
Now, you mentioned Coinbase also dealing with its own legal battle with the SEC. Part of their argument has been, they listed, they went public, they jumped through all of the hoops necessary with the SEC in order to do that, and now being accused of operating an unregistered securities exchange seems to be a contradiction of all the due diligence that went through the listing process. And I guess my broad question to you is, are you talking to any of the other exchanges as you all fight similar battles with the commission?
Yes. Short answer is yes, we are. I wouldn't say we're coordinating or anything like that, but we have to know what's going on in those other cases. The country has to know what's going on in those other cases. So what you'll see is that the Coinbase case is a superset of our case. So there are more issues at issue in the Coinbase case than there are in our case. The SEC is suing Coinbase for example, staking. For their staking program. They're not suing us because we settled our claims with the SEC on staking. The Coinbase case is a little bit farther ahead than ours is, just procedurally speaking. So we expect that their case will enter discovery very soon. It probably is. Actually, they're starting to see discovery papers moving. Our case, we hope, never gets there if we're able to dismiss it at this early stage. But that would be the next step if the case continues.
Sticking with the SEC for a minute, a lot of people were very surprised by the decision last week by the SEC to make this rules change that paves the way for spot Ether ETFs. It seemed to be this total about-face by the agency. Were you surprised, and do you think that this speaks to a larger trend of the regulator softening its stance on crypto more broadly?
I got to tell you, I've been doing this for over a decade. I've been advising innovators and entrepreneurs in crypto since before it was crypto, since it was just Bitcoin. And for over a decade, I wake up surprised every morning. There's nothing that doesn't surprise me about this. Nobody knew, except for probably a select few in the building at the SEC. And maybe they didn't even know a few days before whether that was going to get approved or not. It was approved. We are very likely now to see an ETF. I think it does signal a shift in DC. The industry and the ecosystem and the community of users have all been fighting a long fight on the Hill, at the agencies, to get the recognition that this technology deserves. The last few months have been a meaningful shift in that. Washington, D.C. can swallow up more effort than any town on the planet. And make no mistake, there has been a ton of effort poured into that town by those who believe that we can build a better financial system. And it's been happening over the course of years. But then in the course of weeks, we saw this dramatic shift. We've seen the Biden administration start to think really hard about reaching back across the aisle and supporting the nonpartisan movement that's going on in Congress to support this industry and to support this ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, it was SAB 121 a couple of weeks ago. We saw more than 20 Dems join the coalition in favor of that. More recently, we Fit 21 that passed the House last week. I think it was north of 70 Democrats that were on board. It does, I mean, it certainly, from my perspective, seems to be this shifting tide of pro-crypto legislation. You yourself, and you had mentioned this earlier, testified, I believe, before a House subcommittee. You've been an active voice in terms of requesting that hard and fast rules be set by Congress. So, I mean, talk to me. How do you feel things are going in DC right now?
Yeah, I think that things are going better than they ever have gone. We've been part of this conversation for a very long time at Kraken. I've been at Kraken for 4 years, but Kraken's been involved in the discussion since well before that. Fit 21 is a piece of legislation that we support. And we were pleased to see so many, we were pleased to see that kind of support in Congress that you described, but in particular we were pleased to see the recognition that crypto is a nonpartisan issue. It's not about Republicans or Democrats. You can look around at this conference, right? You don't see any red versus blue. What you see are jobs, efficiencies, saving money, saving time for ordinary people. That's why I got into this over a decade ago. That's why you're seeing new people get into this. And look, there's always going to be those who want to get rich quick. There's always going to be scammers, right? Any new technology will inevitably attract that. But at the core of this is something very different. At the core is efficiency. And that is not a Democrat thing. That's not a Republican thing. And that's, I think, why you're starting to see the likes of Nancy Pelosi not just vote in favor of Fit 21, but be one of the first, if not the first votes in favor. This is not about Democrats versus Republicans, and both sides of the aisle are starting to recognize that.
Now, you're a part of a group of firms that are pooling money together for crypto PACs, supporting candidates that, you know, express pro-digital asset views. Tell me how that's going.
Yeah, we sure are. We sure are. I have been personally, some of our executives have been personally for a long time. What we're starting to see now is that focus, that sophistication of being able to really make good on this promise that we've had of being single issue voters and single issue donors in this case. Kraken is not a bunch of Democrats. Kraken is not a bunch of Republicans. The client is a single issue contributor to policy. We contribute, we support, we advocate in favor of crypto. And we do that with Democrats, we do that with Republicans. We were really pleased to see one of the candidates from a major party, Donald Trump, endorse crypto, signal open-mindedness to technology, open-mindedness to the industry. We shouldn't credit that one moment with too much, but there's no question that shook the table for a lot of people who were kind of just sitting at the table, right? It shook some people awake that we're really pleased to see.
Do you think this is the year that we catch up with jurisdictions with respect to establishing a crypto framework? I'm thinking of MiCA in Europe. I'm thinking about, you know, Singapore and Hong Kong and the UAE being years ahead of us in terms of setting hard and fast rules. How optimistic are you that by the end of this year we'll see some of this legislation get signed into law? Yeah,
it's a fantastic question, right? In Europe, you see the markets in cryptocurrency assets rule charge ahead. They were light years ahead of us on this, and as a result, we're seeing American companies, American innovators, American entrepreneurs move offshore. Now, we are committed to the U.S. market. Kraken has made that public. But I got to tell you, it's tough to deploy capital here. It's tough to employ people. It's tough to plan for product rollouts without certainty. Europe, I don't know how they beat us on this. I kind of do, and I could spend a little bit of time on it, but they beat us on this. Europe was faster to market. They were faster to create rules of the road. And as a result, the U.S. has languished. And we have permitted regulators to play political football with a policy issue that holds, as you can see, jobs, livelihoods in the balance. It's disappointing to see how far behind we've fallen in this. I'm an American, you can tell by my accent, this is where I'm from. I want to see things done right here. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, Singapore, even the UK is showing signs of leapfrogging us on these issues. I don't think all is lost. I think that we've seen the momentum that we want to see. I wish we could have seen it a while ago, but we're seeing that momentum now. I think we're headed in the right direction. So all eyes will be on the Senate now. There are a couple of efforts in the Senate that we think are going to work very well, and that's the future that we have ahead of us.
Last question. At this exact same conference last year, I spoke to your counterpart at Coinbase, Paul Grewal, and they were in the thick of dealing with the Wells notice that turned into the formal lawsuit. I know that you guys are undergoing a similar battle, but the environment, the atmosphere just seems to be different this year. And even though these legal fights are still going on and these bankruptcies are still being resolved, which is at the opposite end of the crypto ecosystem, I do feel like there's more positive momentum than there was last year. Is that purely a product of pricing? Is it the fact that spot Bitcoin ETFs have really changed the calculus for the sector more broadly? Or how do you feel about the industry?
I don't know. I know what you can see here. I know what I can see here. I don't know what the cameras can see. But all these people have been pushing and pushing and pushing to have their voices heard. And eventually, that dam breaks. And that's what you're seeing happen. This is a grassroots movement. This is people having their voices heard. And yes, it's starting to work. Things have changed.